I'm just super pumped to see Buff in the house. So you guys are in for a treat. That's all I can say. Thank you, Buff, for being here. Thank you, Renuka. Thank you, Sumit. Thank you.
No, I think every mentor that we have, we really appreciate you guys doing this and spending an hour or two with our participants. So yeah.
So yes,
is
we
it
are
live
now. Yeah, we are live now. Yes, we are live.
Okay, good. So as usual, we were kind of 16:05 or 6:05. That's more or less our start time anyway. So yeah, we are live, and I think we have nearly 20-25 of our participants already with us on here. So welcome back, everyone. Another session of our DevCamp. I'm going to just go and check my screen where I have the Spotify going on. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the Saturday session. It was, I think it took us from basics to Firebase very quickly in the last 3 weeks of our journey together. I saw interesting questions on Slack regarding the assignment. So what I would say here is basically keep your assignment simple. We just want to make sure that the concept that was covered within the session, you guys are using those concepts while doing the assignments. If you want to go advanced, really up for it. I like the idea what Charcy said. If you want to do some admin stuff, I think what I was thinking there is we can actually join together to make that idea that you had about questions and answers and take it all the way to publishing the app. So yeah, let's see how that goes in the next 2 weeks. So you actually have, I think, 1.5 weeks left to finish that Firebase assignment. And again, any questions, we are using the Slack channel. So that's me. The people who have joined us on Zoom have the privilege to ask questions directly to Puff. Just introducing Puff. He is going to be today's speaker. We're going to talk about what's new in Firebase. So all the basics have been covered. So we'll see what is new. And then again, you guys can always unmute yourself to ask questions in the end. We also have some questions from ourselves. We'll actually ask those. So yeah, over to you, Puff. Tell us what's new, what's going on the Firebase side.
It's my final moment where I get to unmute. I know that if I unmute, I start talking and I won't stop. So good, a good whatever part of the day it is for you all. I know that we're UK focused, so good evening. For me, it's 10 a.m. in the morning. I'm in San Francisco. And sorry, I just see the first question land. We're not playing bingo today. For those wondering, at Flutter Vikings, we built a bingo app. We played that with way too many people, and it crashed at the end of our talk, and it was glorious.
Wow,
but people
I
could win.
The last bit. Okay.
Yeah, it just was published yesterday. The good edit, also the live stream wasn't great. I heard from people, and indeed we brought a few. I'm actually not sure if you really bring Sparkies or Sparky chooses to come along. But we had a few Sparkies at the site and people could win them. That is a rare occasion, by the way. Sparkies are really hard to find because Sparky is shy by nature. Honestly, also he's mischievous. So if the stream cuts out, I swear it's not me, it's not Sumit, it's literally Sparky doing that.
So, blame it on Sparky. That's the thing.
Exactly, yeah. And if it starts working again, then it's probably this fellow, which is Zappy. Zappy is a new character for Invertase's zap.run environment. Yeah. Who has used zap.run? Just leave a comment and tell me how you feel about it. Zap.run is an online editor for Flutter code where you can then easily run it in a web container, and it's really, really cool to see that happening. So A Firebase engineer, I think is what I said. Yes, that's what I said. So I am a Firebase engineer. It's really true. And I am on the Firebase team. I've been on the team, well, pretty much since we joined Google. I've been a Firebase user for 10 years now. And yes, I'm still a Firebase user also. And in that time, I've spoken to a lot of developers who got started with Firebase. And it's been awesome to see, because Firebase was one of the first backend services back when that type of tool didn't really exist yet. And we are still, right, we allowed developers to build apps that didn't realize they could build. And then Flutter came along, and Flutter did the other side of that, right? Flutter allowed them to build a cross-platform UI with like a single code base, and Firebase is a cross-platform backend service. So the two go together like peanut butter and jelly, which I normally have on a slide, but somehow I don't have that on my slides today. Speaking of slides, Smith, can you stop sharing so that I can start presenting?
Okay, over to you.
Zoom is very picky about that. And now I can. Let me see, where are my slides? Okay. I see my slides. I see a tiny slice of all of you, so this should all be good. Can I get a thumbs up if everyone else can see my slides too? Or something in the chat. I just like some liveliness. If you've ever seen me speak, you know that I don't deal with silence very well. Yes, thank you. Awesome. Okay, what's new in Firebase? Of course, when I created this slide deck, because I'm very well prepared, I didn't realize that Smith already did like the what's Firebase. So I also prepared a bit of that. We are going to look at Firebase. I think I picked different parts to look at those, so that is cool. I love new animated emojis that we have from Google. It's from one of our GitHub. Wow, somebody might want to mute. But I love those because they make my slides much livelier. But so Firebase. Firebase is a beautiful intro animation. But it's also a tool of connected tools and services for Google that really was created with one goal only. And it's to help developers build better apps. That's all that Firebase is. Now, we have wonderful taglines that are way more complex than this, but really for me, this is what Firebase is. When I joined Firebase, our CEO was, he's British. So he says, help developers build extraordinary apps. But I find extraordinary a really difficult word to say. So we now say build better apps, because that's much easier for me. So, and Firebase is a set of backend services, and it's used by pretty much everyone. Like we have 3 million plus active like apps. That's not installs, that would be really low, but active apps. And yeah, honestly, if you have a phone, Firebase is used in one or more of the apps. In part, that's because we have Firebase Cloud Messaging, which I talk a bit about, but also lots of other tools. And people are often surprised when they see something like the New York Times here. The New York Times uses Firebase for many of its puzzle games, for example. The Telegraph is there, so more familiar for people from the UK probably. And like we are used by many of these. Some of the bigger brands you'll see actually started with Firebase. Oops, I didn't click anything, but I was ready for the next slide anyway. Firebase is a set of products. This slide is slightly outdated. It's missing some of our newer products, but this is a set of like representative of what Firebase has. And we're not going to go through all of these because that would not be a great idea. But what is important is that you realize that we have tools to help you build apps. Then we have tools to help you improve the app quality before and after you ship the app. And then we have tools to help you get more users or re-engage users that you already have. And I want to look at a few specifically today. So I want to have a look at cloud messaging. Because as I said, cloud messaging it's actually not our most used product, but it's definitely the most intensively used product. Cloud messaging sends push notifications. So if you see push notification on your screen and it's on an Android phone, it comes from cloud messaging. It just does more than just push notifications. That's what you should always realize. For every notification that you see on your screen that might have been delivered with cloud messaging, there's probably a dozen or more messages that are going that you don't see, but they're being sent with the same mechanism. And cloud messaging is behind all of those. It also has its own logo, but let's have a look at what it does. So we do very broad messaging. And to give you some idea, I brought it back to QPS. We sent about, well, last time I checked, we sent 11.5 million messages per second. So it's a lot of API calls that are happening there. And as I said, not all of those show up though. Cloud messaging works across Android, where it started, iOS and web nowadays. And on Android, it started, and it was back in the days of Google Chat. So it was actually a channel on Google Chat. Nowadays, we use a different platform. And on iOS, of course, we use APNS to deliver the messages. And on web, we use web push. Sorry, I had to think of the API. OK. So we can target messages in many ways. For example, if you use Firebase Analytics, you can use that to target messages to specific groups of users. For example, all your users in a specific region, or maybe all your users in a specific age group, or your users that speak a certain language. Like you can target messages to groups of users. You can also do experiments based on that. Nowadays, you can do personalization. And you can do A/B tests based on that. So you can show a different message to a different group of users to see where they click more often on that message, right? Because you often do a cloud messaging for re-engagement, right? If somebody gets a chat message sent to them, but they're not actively in the chat app, then you show a message, right? And you can see what happens if you send different types of messages, right? If you use an image in there, does it help, or are people actually more likely to ignore the message when that happens? And we do this to a lot of devices. But we notice that it's hard, or not every type of message needs a one-to-one like targeting. Many messages are about like certain topics that you might want to subscribe to. For example, right, you all might be interested in football, right, and soccer. Or you might all be interested in getting chat messages. Or you might have another topic that you are like as a group interested in. And for that, you can use topic messaging. So with topic messaging, you, as the sender, don't target one specific user, but you target everyone who's subscribed to a certain topic, which is a much more efficient way for you to call the API. And then we do all the what's known as fan out behind the scenes. OK, how does FCM work? So FCM is like a cloud-based service that you interact with through like the APIs that we provide. One of those APIs plugs into your device. Then when the device starts up, it registers with FCM and it gets a token, a so-called FCM token or device token. And that identifies that app on that device. You can then use that to target messages to that device. So for example, right, in this case, the device subscribes to a chat room, right? And it does that with cloud messaging. And then your backend service, right, sends a message to that chat room. And that's then sent to everyone who's subscribed. So this is one way of sending messages. Now, of course, it's not a single phone. We have many phones in here. So what actually happens is we send a message to a specific device here, for example, and it goes directly to just that device. So this means that your server needs to know the token. So you create what's known as a token registry, and then you send it to that specific user on that specific device. You send that message. That's one way of sending a message. You can also send it to what we had before, right? The topic, the chat room in this case, and it could be many topics. And you could send it to audiences. Remember, that's what we talked about first. If you use analytics from Google, you can build audiences out of specific attributes of the users. And keep in mind, we do this across platforms. So we don't just do it on Android. We also do it on iOS and on web. For iOS, that means that we call out to APNS for you. So you need to register some configuration data, and then we do the call to APNS for you. So you have a single API call. We send it to all of your users. Cloud messaging. As I said, a heavily used Firebase product that you're going to use. And keep in mind there that most of the messages that are sent are actually not turning into notifications. So one thing to keep in mind, we don't show 11.5 million notifications every second. That would be a lot. OK, let's pick one product out of the improving app quality. So these are all kinds of products that help you improve app quality. Tools like TestLab, for example, help you improve the app quality before you ship the product by allowing you to run tests on a set of devices that we have. So we have a device catalog, and you can pick from that, and you can then use it. Literally, we're live streaming, what the heck. We yesterday saw a request for like 8,000 Pixel 7 devices or something like that showing up. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of devices. But that's what you get when you have a TestLab. I'm not sure, by the way, if this is normal. We just saw it happening. So TestLab is one of those. We also do real user monitoring. So Let's have a look at Crashlytics and just look at the use case, right? We all know, right, that we build an app and it works perfectly, right? We test everything on our own device. If you're unlike me, you might even have written unit tests, right? But you run them on a limited set of devices and you know it works, right? And you also know that you're going to get all these great reviews on the App Store, right? And so you're happy, everything launched, everything landed, right? And then you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and this happened, right? Because what turns out, right, you didn't test everything. You tested it on devices that you had access to, but your users have a much broader range of devices, right? Or your users are in different time zones, or they speak a language that you didn't think of. And your app doesn't handle that and it crashes. Now, if you're not using a tool like Crashlytics, then what I always had to do was ask people for steps to reproduce. And I'm not sure how it is for you, but that's a painful process for me, right? Because you have to ask them, then they tell you, and you don't really understand what they did on screen B because you thought you handled everything, right? And they did something different. So, right, we're speaking a different language, essentially. Crashlytics removes the need for like asking for steps to reproduce by actually capturing the crash on the user's device. So it captures every crash. It monitors while the app is running, and when the app crashes, it captures the crash and it sends it to our servers. And on those servers, we then aggregate it. And this is great because bad crashes are a major contributor to bad reviews. So it says here, and this was researched, 62% of people uninstall an app if they experience crashes or like laggy performance. And I'm always surprised because I'm like, who's the other 38%, right? When an app crashes, I uninstall it. I'm really sorry, right? It's like, and sure, I might be for something like whatever, right? WhatsApp, I might be forgiving it once or twice. But if the app is not a good experience, there's alternatives, right? And your app, like my app, needs to excel at delivering a good experience to the user. Hence, Crashlytics. So as I said, we we monitor the app, and then when it crashes on a user's device, we send that to the servers. So this is known as real user monitoring, or RUM. And that's done on, well, when this slide was created, 3 billion devices worldwide. It's a lot more actually nowadays. So we get a lot of crash reports. And it's really a lot. And what we do with those is that we turn them into a very simple dashboard. So you instrument your application with Crashlytics, then you sign into the Firebase console and you go to the Crashlytics dashboard and you get this view. And at the top left, you see the main metric that you want to be looking at, which is called crash-free users. So this is the percentage of users that are running the app without experiencing crashes, which is great. What's even better is that you see in this chart that the line is going up to the right. So we're doing a great job there. So then you see some trends on the right, but if you look at the bottom, you see that we show specific problems. Now, these are not individual crashes. These are actually, we sort of cluster the crashes together based on pretty much the stack trace. That's what we look at. And then we cluster them together for like similar crashes. And then we prioritize based on how many people are experiencing a crash. So this is a prioritized list of crash categories, I would say. And you can see that we then capture specific details about it. Like this crash apparently only happened on iOS 11. We try to give you insights like that for how you can act on a crash quickly and where it happens. We have more details. We have the entire stack trace for like all of them. So it's a lot of data, as I said. And we can track, for example, by version. If you see at the top, you see total crashes by version. And that means that we can see that the blue version, 1.5, it says here, actually has more crashes than previous versions. So we probably want to check if something regressed in there. On the right, you can see when it happened and where people are running the app and how much it crashes for them. And then you see the stack trace, right? And you can, in the stack trace, then start, oh, sorry, clicked once too often. In the stack trace, start looking, it's like, where did it happen in my code? So that's Crashlytics. Crashlytics tries to make sure, because we know that your app is installed on a lot of real user devices, right? You can't check all of them. So we try to send you alerts when something interesting happens. So if, for example, if there's a new fatal issue occurring that we haven't seen before, we send you an alert. And that can be either an email or through a Slack channel or like some other channels or through Jira, right? Or if an issue that you fixed in the past is suddenly reoccurring, we send you an alert for a regress issue. Or if a crash that used to happen not too often, so it was low in your priority list, is suddenly happening a lot more. Let's say it's something related to the date, right? You have a Halloween special that's coming up, right? Like suddenly like your Halloween special code kicks in, right, and crashes all the time. Well, that's a velocity alert, and we have alerts for that too. So we try to make sure that when you wake up, you have an actionable set of bugs that you can look at and have the highest impact of improving stability for your users. Okay, improving app quality. Honestly, where most of us are spending our time is in building apps. And I've highlighted a few of the products here, but Firebase has a lot of backend services for building apps. Honestly, when you build an app, you need a database, right? And we have 2 of them. I want to quickly have a look at like how you build an application. Because if you're like me, excuse me, give me one moment. Wow, there we go. If you're like me, then I was raised in the domain of doing 3-tier application architecture. And that means that, right, you have on the one side, you have your database. On the other side, you have the devices. And then in between, you put a server, right? And your server has, I'm actually flipping my hand. And your server handles all of the logic, right? It handles authentication, authorization, handles all the business logic of like finding the chat messages, right, and showing them. And that is great because you control everything. And it's also really bad because it means you have to do everything. So when we started Firebase, we said, it's like, what if we remove the server and let the devices connect directly to the databases? And we were all excited, right? Because this is awesome, because that means we no longer have to write server code. And if you've written server code, like, you know, that's like a lot of work to write and maintain that. So this is really good, but there are some issues with it, right? Because if anyone can write to the database, what's going to make sure that they don't do anything malicious? Well, it's very easy, right? Important code we're going to capture in a backend process. And it doesn't really matter here. I put server, but I actually show you a mobile device, right? It can be that. It can be your own server that you already have, right? That only you have access to. Or it can be something like Cloud Functions. Then what we do is that we put security rules on this database. And I see that I miss a tiny lock on the left. It actually moved to the right here. Let's ignore that part. But these security rules protect our database. So you write rules that says, okay, like this is the user, and this user can do A, B, C. That's a great way of allowing you to write only client-side code or mostly client-side code, but still have a secure data layer. Okay, so what's Firebase? I'm not going to read all these bullet points. Firebase is here to help you build better apps. We handle security and scalability because we want you to focus on building features that your users love, right? No user has ever come up to you and said, well, okay, I can't say no user, but for me, hardly ever does a user of an app come up to me and say, I love the database that you use there. Right? It just doesn't happen, right? They care about features. The database is not a feature. They want your app to be like scalable, and your database matters for that. They want your app to be secure, right? And authorization and authentication matter for that. But they don't really care about what tools you use for that. They just want you to build new features. Okay. So that's what's new in Firebase. Now let's look at what's, sorry, that's what's Firebase. Now let's look at what's new in Firebase. I was laughing because an animation showed up briefly. Yeah, we're not going to look at that slide. That's my table of contents slides. We probably have a lot of Flutter users here, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, I want to see in the chat, how much do you like developing with Flutter? Yeah.
I think the scale is lower. You need to increase the scale. Just like 10
mine
plus.
is 11 because this one goes up to 11, right? You know that. But I love developing with Flutter.
Yeah.
So before Flutter came around, I would do most of my development for web. I know the other platforms, but my default platform would be web. When I started working with Flutter, I noticed a change because I started actually reproducing issues that people were talking about in iOS. I was like, huh, that's interesting. I always liked developing for iOS. There was nothing wrong with it. But why is this now like my go-to platform? And it turns out it's because my edit and update cycle is faster on iOS than it is on web, right? Like writing JavaScript code. My mind was blown. I'd seen, of course, right, what stateful hot reload is. I know it. Like, I understand how it works. That's not the thing. Finding yourself using it like that was such a mind-blowing moment for me. And it shows the power of Flutter. So stateful hot reloads is key there. And for the longest time, Firebase has worked with Flutter because Flutter is a UI toolkit, so it allows you to build cross-platform UIs that from a single code base. But yeah, most applications get better if you have some backend behind it, right? And that's where Firebase comes in. So we've always worked wonderfully with the Flutter team. There have always been plugins to use Firebase within Flutter, but we always got the question about official support. We shipped that at I/O this year. And that means that we got high fives all around, of course, but mostly it means that we included a lot of documentation about Flutter in the Firebase documentation. So if you now go to firebase.google.com and then click on the documentation link, you will actually see that we have documentation for Flutter in here. For example, here you see, like this is a screenshot of our Firebase site, of the Firebase documentation. You see you have a drop-down menu, fundamentals, and in there is Flutter. See, that's awesome, right? I love that. And if you click that, right, and you, for example, here I go to authentication and click on Flutter, get started. And I get these code snippets that I know because these are Flutter code snippets, right? I just do a pub add, right? Flutter pub add, Flutter run, all the stuff that I know how to Flutter, right? This is great because this is now finally integrated into the Firebase documentation site. If you hear me saying Fire site or Firebase dev site, those are the internal names for it. And that's really useful. We added it to all the products, so we have a lot of snippets. For example, this is the documentation, same site for Firestore. And you see that we have a page called listening for real-time updates, which is one of the unique features of Firestore. And here you see that we have code snippets for many languages, including Dart and Flutter, right? And we have this for all these languages here. So on the previous one, you saw that in the left navigation, we had a node for Flutter. For Firestore, we have tabs for every language because there's many more languages we support there. And Flutter is one of them. One of the things I really like is that we also actually added an example in here of how to show information in a stream builder. So how to include it in the user interface, which we don't do for other platforms, but we did do that for Flutter for some of the pages. So documentation, really key. Honestly, we hadn't added the platform to Firebase in a while. I now recall how much work it is and how many code snippets we have in our documentation. It's really insane. There's like hundreds of them. And I know we need more, by the way. So as a person contributing to those code snippets, I think it's a lot. As a consumer of the code snippets, I'm like, are you kidding me? We're still missing like so many use cases that would be useful. Okay, we also allow you to now add Firebase or Flutter applications in the Firebase console. So, right, there's two things always, right? When you use Firebase in a Flutter app, that app needs to know about your Firebase project, right? So it needs to know where to connect to, but also the Firebase project needs to know about the Flutter app. That you do in the Firebase console, and we added a new flow for that. So I should have waited with clicking. We'll wait until it goes around. So you start with a list of projects, like we see here, then you click on your project, and then at the top, when you add an app, you now have an option to add a Flutter app. And we then take you through 3 steps. Now, these steps are depending on the Flutter Fire CLIs. That's the command line interface for integrating Flutter and Firebase. And it's beautiful. I wish I had made it up. I think that's one of the most wonderful tools we added because it makes adding Firebase to a Flutter app easier than adding it to the native apps that it's a part of. So it's harder for me to add it to like just an iOS app than it is to add it to an iOS app that's running, that's using Flutter, which for me is like mind-blowing to see. So we have official Flutter support. I always say that if you combine Firebase and Flutter, you get magic unicorn rainbow sparkles. But nowadays, I would also say you can just launch your apps faster. Right? Really one of my favorite changes. It took a long time to get there, but it is there now. If you find stuff missing on the documentation, always leave feedback on the documentation there. If you find something that doesn't work in the integration, if the SDKs are not working, please file bugs on the GitHub repo. We have a team working hard on that. The folks on my birthdays are part of that team, and they are really fast in fixing things. Okay, who has heard of Firebase App Check before? Okay. Remember when I talked about security rules, right? We need security rules because with Firebase, yeah, you ship your API keys in your app. And if you're like me, the first time I saw this, like, ooh, that sounds dangerous, right? Especially when I started because security rules didn't exist yet. And essentially, this is what happens right when you're writing a Flutter app. So let's say that you have these two lines and you have a lot of blank space between it. That blank space is because when you connect Firebase, we tell you to add this block of code in there. And right, this block of code makes you cringe because like, wait, we have all these values in here that look like, I can't remember them. They look secret. One of them is even called API key, right? If you had this on a slide, you would probably either have fake values or click to the slide very quickly. And these are not fake values, and I'm not clicking through the slide very quickly. These are the actual configuration values for connecting to one of my projects, the projects that we used to play bingo at Flutter Vikings. And I'm very confident showing them here because I've secured the backend. I know you cannot do any damage to this because I know how to write security rules. But writing security rules is hard. It's a language that you're not used to, and it takes time. Oh, sorry. So is there a better way to do this? Right. So remember, the security rules sit in front of the database. But yeah, if I would show them to you, the ones that I used for the bingo app, they're not easy, right? It's easy to get started, but securing every little thing is hard. So what we actually get a lot is this request, which is, yeah, can I allow it for only my app? And for the longest time, our answer was like, no, that's not possible. It's a cloud-hosted API, right? How do you expect us to only allow your app to use it? Right? And really, this is the answer I gave. You might still find it on Stack Overflow because I gave that answer quite a bit. And then like some engineers came up to us and said, it's like, well, actually, we think we can build this. So that's Firebase AppCheck. AppCheck allows you to only allow your code to access the backend services in Firebase. So this is the product pitch, but yeah, I really don't like a lot of words. So this is the product pitch that I work from. Say that you have a Fire4 database, any of the supported backend services. What we do is we put AppCheck in front of that, and AppCheck controls all access to the database. And that means that any user request goes through AppCheck, and that's allowed. Unless it's a malicious user request, then it's not allowed. So we make sure that only requests that come from your real application on a real non-jailbroken user device are allowed access to these backend services. And we do that through a mechanism called attestation. And this mechanism exists on iOS, Android, and on web. On web, it's typically a version of a reCAPTCHA. On Android, it's device check, but there's a new one. Play integrity is the new one. And on iOS, there's also many of these. App attestation is, I think, the latest one. So we interact with those providers for you. And we make sure that the calls come from your real code on a real device. And then we go back here, right? And that means that we can reject calls that don't come from your real device. If you're starting a new app, I recommend enabling AppCheck right away. If you already have an app, I recommend enabling AppCheck. It comes in two parts, right? It comes with a thing that goes into your SDK, right? It's essentially its own SDK. It goes into your application. And that starts sending AppCheck tokens with all requests. So you want to put that in as soon as possible. So if you're starting a new app today, put it in today. If you already have an app, also put it in today. Then you monitor how many requests am I getting that are validated with AppCheck, and how many do I get that are not validated with AppCheck. And right, if you just started, then probably 100% of them have AppCheck. That's good. If you have an existing user base, you just look for like what percentage of users are still using a version that doesn't have AppCheck or are abusive. And then at some point you say, okay, now Firebase, please enforce that only AppCheck requests are allowed. Those requests will not hit your database anymore. They will not even like be caught by your security rules because they don't reach the security rules. Okay. I saw one question. You can use AppCheck with, I'll get to that in a moment. I saw one about MongoDB. It's a good question. Okay, so yes, we've been shipping your API keys since 2012. Keep in mind, these are not really the API keys that you're used to. They are configuration values. But you can keep shipping these API keys with Firebase, right? AppCheck is a great additional step there. AppCheck doesn't replace security rules. You use AppCheck to rule out 80% of abuse quickly. And then you use security rules for fine-grained control and the other 20%. You can currently use AppCheck on these products. We're working on more products. You can also use AppCheck to control your own backend services. That doesn't mean it's integrated in Mongo's RAM database, for example. They don't do that, but you could write your own layer and then interact with the AppCheck token that you get. It's honestly very similar to verifying authentication tokens. It's just another token. It's just instead of authenticating a user, it authenticates the app. Okay, app check is generally available. This one is really quick, but I wanted to show it. The Firebase console now remembers what features you use. Because I mostly want to show it because it's so surprising that we didn't have this before. So when for the first like 6 years of the Firebase console, if you would go to the Firebase console, you would see this list of products. And sure, we put them in categories, but it was just a list of 20 products, probably more because we broke out some features. It's like, great. I actually mostly use 3 or 4 products on like a project, right? How about you just show me those 3? Well, guess what? Now we do. Right, so we now at the top of the left navigation show you the most recently used products. That is great because for me it shows like really 3 or 4 normally, and all the others are still there, but you don't have to see them. You can hide stuff that you've accidentally added and that you're not using. For me, that is great because I sometimes need to look at the dashboard for a product to take a screenshot for a presentation. After that, I want to typically hide that product again, right? Because I'm not actively using it. And you can still see all other products. They're still there. So very simple feature, but really key for me because I just noticed it saves me clicks every day. Okay, this one is actually really new. This one landed last week. We had a blog post about it. I wonder if anyone saw it because it was one of our top feature requests. It's officially getting its big unveil at the Firebase Summit in 2 weeks, but we already rolled it out because honestly, we need to make sure that you're not all hitting it too hard. So if you write security rules for cloud storage, right, you can control access based on all the information that's available in cloud storage, which means that you can control it based on the path. You can allow or reject writes based on the file size, right? Maybe the extension, all that type of stuff. But how do you build like the most common scenarios, like role-based authentication on that, or authorization, sorry, role-based authorization on that? Well, for years, I had to explain how to do it, which is you generate security rules, then you deploy them, and then you update them all the time. And sure, it works. It's not great. And guess what? Now it's great. Because what you want to do is you want to store the information about those roles in Firestore, and then you can access that from your storage security rules. So that's what we now allow. You can, in your cloud storage security rules, now access Firestore. Brand new, top requested feature that we got for security rules. And it looks like this. Sorry for the small code. I hope it's readable. I marked the important things in bold. On the first line, you see that we are writing security rules for Firebase storage. And this is a proprietary language. It reads like JavaScript. It's meant to mostly be JavaScript, but it is something custom to Firebase. Then you see that we have a bucket, which is how cloud storage works. Then we match a certain path in there. So for each user, we have a directory with their files. And in there, then we have a file ID. And we say that you are allowed to read and write a file if it's your directory, which is a good idea. And if there is a document in the Firestore database for this user. This is new. You couldn't do that before. So when this runs, when you are doing a write operation, our security rules go out to Firestore and check if that document exists in the database. The same for the allow read, right? Someone can read this if they are a friend of the user that posted the image. And you can see that we actually read the document and then check if the user ID is in the friends list for this user. These rules are as simple as they come for doing like friend-based access control. And this wasn't possible until last week. So this is a brand new feature. We just released it. Okay. Let's see, we have one more thing coming up. Right, ooh, wow, these are fuzzy. That's what you get when you stretch emojis to a really big size. But in less than 2 weeks, we'll have the Firebase Summit in New York. Who has ever been to a Firebase Summit? Like, Sparky has been, actually. Like Dash has also been, by the way. Like for Zappy, it's going to be his first Firebase Summit. But in 2 weeks, we have the Firebase Summit in New York. It's on Tuesday, the 18th of October. And we're hosting this in Google's new event center on Pier 57, which from what I hear is a gorgeous venue. It's right on the Hudson River. We are doing a keynote where we have lots of announcements, including the one that you just saw about cross-surface security rules. And we are doing Ask Firebase Live. We have tech talks. We have workshops with instructors. We have Ask Firebase in person so that you can ask your favorite engineer. We have all the things going on. So I really hope that I get to see everyone there. We won't have a drum band, is what I hear, but this is how we closed out the Firebase Summit in Madrid 3 years ago, which was the last Firebase Summit that we did in person before COVID happened. So that was awesome. I see we have some time left, which is, oh, I'm not showing my next slides, apparently. I did have a slide that says questions, but I'll probably just scroll back to this. Let me see if I can actually jump to that slide. Yeah, you probably have some questions, was my guess.
There have been quite a few.
Good. Are you okay if I stop presenting?
Yeah, we can actually.
Good, because now I can see you all a bit better.
Yeah, so we have quite a few. I think I can start from something which I had in mind about when you mentioned messages. So when you're using cloud-based messaging, do we get reports on the opens and what got viewed, etc., etc.?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, for sure. And so those reports are available. We export the data. Sorry, I was thinking of like when I last saw it. We export the data to BigQuery for that, and it's still available. We've been adding a lot of information about this type of like monitoring and metrics to our documentation. So check the left navigation for like Firebase Cloud Messaging. There's a lot of extra nodes there now. There was also recently, about half a year ago, a blog post by one of the engineers on patterns that you see in that access data. So they were explaining like the open rate is the one you were asking about, for example, right? And he's right. The engineer explained that if your open rate keeps going like down slowly, you're probably not removing stale tokens, right? And I was like, that is so true, and I never realized that pattern, right? Because tokens expire, and you need to you need to get a new token, but you also need to remove the old token, because if you don't, your open rates will get lower and lower over time because you have a lot of old tokens, and the API will gladly tell you every time that like that token that like isn't valid anymore. You need to remove your own them from your own token registry, and these types of patterns are really great to recognize. So we definitely have more troubleshooting there. But I must admit, it's also still my top one feature request for cloud messaging is making it easier, even easier for developers to troubleshoot delivery problems. As soon as you have a token ID, the FCM token, you often can get somewhere. Until you like have that for your users, it's really hard to know why it wasn't delivered. From our side, by the way, it's normally because the device didn't request it. Because you call them push notifications, they're not really pushed. It's the device polls when it puts. So if the message wasn't retrieved on the device, it's because the device didn't ask for it. Well, unless the message is fired, of course, right? But yeah, that helps a lot with cloud messaging. I learned a lot once I realized that it's actually still polling. It's just polling outside of your application process. It happens on the operating system or the Google Play Services level. Great question.
Okay, one question I had from Damien. Damien, do you want to unmute yourself? Maybe that would be an option for you to ask this question yourself. It's about the push notification on the new document. Should I?
Yeah. Hey, Puff. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Do you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we can. Sorry, I was waiting for your question, Damien.
Yeah, my question is, how can we send a push notification every time a new document is added to the Firestore database?
Great.
You know, but
question.
not doing it in the client is like somehow configure something in Firebase. That's my question.
That's a great question. I'm clicking through, so if you see my eyes wandering, it's because I was looking for a URL to share with you. So we have an example of that in Cloud Functions. So if you haven't used Cloud Functions are a part of Firebase that allow you to run your code on Google servers in response to things that happen within Firebase. So the example I shared is, it's called notifying users when something interesting happens. And in this case, it's when something gets written to the other database, to the real-time database. But when that happens, we invoke a small piece of code called a cloud function that actually sends that push notification. And it's, as you said, right, you don't want to do this from the client because sending a push notification requires that you specify the FCM server key. And as soon as you specify that, you can send any push notification to anyone using the app, which is something you don't want to do from your client-side application code because, right, that means that all of your users are going to get spammed. If you do that, you wouldn't be the only one. In fact, we've just been doing a major cleanup, like reaching out to a lot of bigger apps who did exactly that. And they are now all running this on a trusted environment, like your own server or Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions is not part of the free plan of Firebase anymore, but it does have a generous free tier. So you can, it has like, I think 3 million like function invocations a month are free or something like that. So it's a ridiculously high number, but you need to be in the paid tier. If you're developing and you don't want to upgrade because like you might make a mistake and create an infinite loop and rack up a huge bill when you do that, we have the emulator suite, which allows you to run stuff like Firestore and all kinds of other products locally. And develop against them. So that's how I now actually develop a lot of this. And then when you get an endless loop, sure, your laptop gets hot, but you don't get a huge bill. If you ever get such a bill because you made a mistake in your code, by the way, reach out to our support team always, please. They are to help.
All right, understood.
Great.
Thank you very much, Push.
Okay. Another question was from Edward Alexandru. Edward, you want to unmute yourself? This is regarding the user approve. I can repeat it if not. 3, 2.
Hi, hello. I don't remember which one to ask.
You have too many. So is this the only? Is that only when the user approves to send
Right
usage
for
to
the?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember for the Crashlytics, they collect information from how the app is used on users' phones, right? I'm guessing that only happens when the users approve to send the data for checking how the app works and stuff like that. We do get that kind of notification on apps every now and then, so I'm guessing that's how it's collected. Or does it happen regardless of any user any notification or not?
I don't know. I assume there's a process where you must request, not request, you must ask permission of the user. That is not part of the API though, so I don't know about it. It should be if for example, Apple or the new guidelines from Android require you to ask this, it is going to be shown on the page that we have about that. So I'm actually quickly checking through the documentation just so you know. So that's why I'm again, my eyes are wandering. It's because I'm looking for what we say about this. Yeah, but you definitely should ask users permission, by the way. Yes, great point.
I'm asking because if I send the app out and people are using it, and if I have to include extra disclaimers and extra information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I just personally don't know the answer. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a really good one. If somebody else knows it in the chat, then definitely do. And I'm looking for the page where we explain this. I just don't see it right away. Our documentation is a bit big. And thank you for the question.
Another one from YouTube. Well, there's multiple ones from YouTube. This is Hem. I'm maybe butchering your name. Sorry for that. What's the next killer feature for Firebase? or what do you want to be the next killer feature from Firebase?
That's actually the thing, right? I can't give away more than I've already done for the Firebase Summit in 2 weeks, but do tune in. We have some really cool things. So cross-service rules honestly was a major feature request for a long time. One of our like the early access partners that we worked with said exactly that. It's exactly what they needed for a long time, and they threw away a lot of workaround code, right? So that was awesome. We have more such features that you've been requesting for a while coming out, but I can't say which ones. If you have a feature request, always file it with our support team, or share it if it's in one of the SDKs, share it on like the GitHub repo for that SDK. If you don't know, most of our SDKs are open source. I think all of our SDKs are open source. So if you go to github.com/Firebase, you'll find them, and that's probably the faster way to get them in front of the engineers. That doesn't mean you'll always hear back and we're going to implement it straight away, but we are actually reading all of the feature requests and bug reports. Not me personally, by the way. I read a lot of them, but I can't say that I read all of them.
Cool. There is one question which is kind of a bit, people have been saying because Flutter uses Dart, they're learning this new thing because when Dart was introduced with Flutter, people were like, why a new language? But it makes sense. So when would so this is from Abdel Rahman. Do you want to unmute yourself, Abdel, or should I go ahead? Okay, so when will Cloud Function support Dart?
It already does support Dart in, or Cloud Run already does support Dart in certain backends. It doesn't support it in Firebase at the moment. We know this is a major feature request. We are looking at it. It's one of the languages we're looking to add, mostly as part of our Cloud Functions for Firebase v2, as it's known. So we are building a new version of the backend built on Cloud Run and Event Arc. Sorry, I was also looking for a link for another question. I should know if it does. And so we're building a new version of Cloud Functions, and there we're running on Cloud Run, which means that you have a much broader set of stacks that you can run on. I don't know if Dart is in the early release version of that. As far as I've used it, I've only used it with Node. It's a completely valid question. Right now, your option is to cross-compile, by the way. Right, you would do a transpiler and then run the JavaScript code. That works. We have people doing that. It's not easy, and you're going to be missing the admin SDKs, essentially. So, and I know because one of our Flutter DREs was actually working with that recently and had lots of trouble. So he was doing exactly this.
And I think a lot of our attendees and the last session we did go through the Cloud Function written in Node. So yeah, it's a good way to actually also learn the other side. I think one more question from my side, and then I'll see if Renuka or other mentor have a difficult one. So I think when you showed us the CLI, I think I liked it. When I was actually, so I had the workshop done, I think a few years ago, and then I was redoing the workshop and I saw the link to use the Firebase CLI that was introduced lately, new, within the Firebase console. So is it that if you already have an app, you want to add Firebase to it, can I use the CLI for that? Or is it always going to be when I start the app, I have to decide that I have to use Firebase as an option for my authentication, authorization, databases, and everything else? So can I do it post?
You can run it later. You can run it later. Yeah, when you run the CLI, it's actually, right, it asks you which project you want to use, which Firebase project, and then it checks if compatible apps are already registered in there. And if not, it creates them for you. And if they are already in there, it can hook up to those. And right, you just add the code that I showed you, right, to your main function. You initialize Firebase typically there. The reason is, by the way, is that while it's an asynchronous call, it's an in-process or on-device asynchronous call. So the initialization of Firebase just requires us to initialize some variables. It returns a future, because any call to native code returns a future, but it's going to complete within milliseconds at most, not hundreds of milliseconds. So you don't need to use a future builder for that. If you want to use a future builder for it, that's totally fine too, by the way, but it's not needed. But right, if you add it to your main, you literally just add that block of code, right? I always start with whatever Flutter app I happen to have lying around, and then add Firebase to it very late normally, because I already know the Firebase part. So my problem is normally in building a good Flutter app.
Mm-hmm. So start with the UI, do the design, and then you can always add that.
Yeah.
Renuka, you want to ask any questions? I think I got Roman and the tough ones, the heavyweights are coming.
So I have one question for you. This is question not from my side. My 13-year-old son who asked me yesterday night that you should ask this question to the Puff, that he's building the app like a web app yesterday with the Firebase and Flutter, and he said that can we not have a feature that I can easily create a database in Firebase, like copy pasting my first record, I can make the changes in that. So why there is not such feature in Firebase that anyone can do easily add the records in Firebase, basically copy pasting the previous records or something like that?
It's a good one. In the real-time database, this does exist actually, and I miss it in Firestore. We're recording, I have to be polite, but I'm not a huge fan of the document builder in Firestore. So I'll admit that I create most of my documents like with API calls because it's faster for me. Yeah. We are making improvements to the console constantly. This one, I essentially haven't won the battle yet on that. We need, honestly, I need to be able to paste the JSON string. Right, that's what I want, which is precisely what I do on real-time database. Right, real-time database, you can paste in the value a JSON string, and it has to be like proper JSON with quotes around every key. Yeah. But if you do, it just builds the tree for you. And yeah, I missed that on Firestore, so I'm with you there. It's a good question. I'll use this to reiterate to the engineering team.
Okay, thank you.
We're always coming to the close of the hour, the top of the hour. So any few questions, if any burning questions? I think I still have few, but I think, yeah, I'm gonna leave it for the next time. Anyone else who wants to just quickly ask something?
So we have like a Roman and Simon is here, so maybe yeah, they can also.
Or even it could be a generic question. Again, we've got Roman and then I think Roman and Simon, everyone has been also helping the guys on the chat. So yeah, they are handling that part. A lot of billing questions. I'm trying to avoid that. Yeah.
Oh, you don't have to. Like, I might not have a satisfactory answer, but I don't. In my role, I can't avoid those. And yes, I also wish we could do a hard cap on Firebase. Believe me. This is one where my entire engineering team is like screaming for it. It's just not possible on Google Cloud, right? It's a real problem. We used to have a pricing plan, a deflating pricing plan that had like a hard limit. It actually didn't. We just essentially accepted abuse there, and the abuse got out of hand. And that's why we can't have nice things, is what one of our engineering leads says. So that's why we had to remove that plan. So yeah, it's really a shame. I really wish. We keep pushing for it, by the way. We just aren't getting there. The best you can do at the moment is setting up billing alerts, which I really highly recommend you do. And of course, we have a series of videos for essentially the emergency brake. I say it's like removing your credit card from the project when you hit a certain amount. That does work. It really does. I would not recommend doing it. I'd recommend for like if you want to catch your own development mistakes, to use the local emulator suite. It's really, really made for that. And if you're seeing abuse, set alerts. Typically, abuse ramps up slower, and work closely with our support team. Right, like they are there to help you when things like this happen. Right, if you make a mistake in production, reach out to the support team. If you are getting abused, check your security rules. See if you're using AppCheck. But also contact the support team, because they can maybe involve the engineering team and see if there's something we can do. We can't always do things for you there, but who knows, right? We are closer to the back end service itself, but we also don't have like magic on-off switches for
yeah, you can monitor yourself a little bit to understand what's going on. Yeah, I think there's one question which I thought is we should not be ignoring it. Again, from online, when Firebase for Windows, that's like without grammar in here. When is the support for Firebase for Windows? The support Windows Firebase on Mac is awesome. So there's like some thumbs up, and then a little bit like his thumbs on the side.
Oh yeah, this one is fully expected. It's a great question though. we thank our friends at Flutter for making Windows a fully supported platform, because now we get this question a lot more again. It is a valid question. Unfortunately, I don't have like great news for it at the moment. As you saw, I hopefully I showed a bit about how much work it was for us to just add documentation for Flutter, right? It already worked, but we just added documentation and some flow. Adding a platform is just a lot of work, requires a whole new engineering team. And right now, yeah, we're not working on that. We have support for it in our C++ SDK, but it's only for development purposes. And yeah, I had a meeting with the engineering leads for this part a few weeks ago, and this is one of the topics we discussed. And we'd love to be able to add it, just time and other priorities are not our friends at this point. I wish we could answer on a yes question, but
yeah. But again, that will be, and there were much more questions. But as I said, the top of the hour, really, really thankful for you to join us and help our mentees. And also, this has been streamed online, so help the people out there. Yes, we love Flutter, we love Dash, and we love Firebase. Renuka, any last words?
I really want to say thank you to the Perf that you're giving all the tips and all the new updates for all our mentees, and this will be really helpful for them to create their projects now, and they will add some new features. Maybe we'll see that they can add the new features what you have shown here today. So for that, thank you so much for your support for this dev camp.
Cool. Yeah. And I can already see people have been literally signing up. You may see the next what do you call it? What's the Sparky? What was that? Yeah, tattoos now. So I think by the end of it, people will be actually going for tattoos. Cheers. Thanks a lot. And hopefully, guys, it was useful for you. And we will talk again on Saturday on our regular sessions.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.